Welcome to the second episode of Not Your Nerdy Neighbor, the tech edition this time. So, this is the first tech episode, and I thought there couldn't be any better way than to take a look at the Steam Deck. So, I got my Steam Deck about 2 months ago, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. We're going to go over what it is, what it isn't, and what I typically do with it. So let's get cracking. It just from the outside comes with a nice hard case. I bought the 512 gigabyte model. There's a 640 gigabyte, a 64 gigabyte flash memory based version of this, a 256 gigabyte NVMe SSD version. So then you're getting into the solid state drives rather than flash memory. And then their flagship model is a 512 gigabyte NVMe. So, and then on the back side, they have a nifty department for storing the wall wart, which is just a USB-C charger that just fits right in the backside. The whole thing fit in my backpack for a recent work trip. Worked out really well. I was able to hook it up to the TV, throw YouTube on to the TV, Netflix, whatever I wanted late at night, fall asleep. But other than that, great little device. So we'll get this opened up. So the 512 gigabyte model, one of the slickest features is it has this micro etched screen that helps with being anti-reflective, anti-glare. It's also a more resilient screen as well. There's two thumbsticks, two touchpads. These are just potentiometers. They are not Hall effects or magnetic in any way. You have your standard A, B, X, Y, your start button, your select button. They use the Xbox controller scheme for those two buttons. One of the buttons has three horizontal lines, and then the other one has two squares that are cascading each other. And then, of course, your reliable D-pad when that's needed. There is a Steam button that will open the menu, and then there is a button with three dots, or also known as an ellipsis if you're in the writing world, with two speakers that pack quite a punch, followed by a USB port on the top. This is not Thunderbolt enabled. However, you can plug it into a Thunderbolt dock and charge it. It just won't work at Thunderbolt speeds. And then you have a 3.5 jack, which seems to be rare nowadays with portable electronics. And then your up and down buttons. You do have bumpers, triggers, and then you have 4 programmable paddle buttons on the back. This has been especially handy in The Witcher 3 when you're trying to swim, trying to hold the stick up and then press A to go deeper down or to go back up again. It's kind of nice just to have one finger that can simulate pressing X or A while you're swimming. But that's just one very specific example. But yeah, let's power it on. And then while that's booting up, there is a microfiber cloth that does come with the Steam Deck. And this little loop right here, I didn't know why this was even in here to begin with. I guess it's to help you in getting your Steam Deck out of the case. I didn't think about that. But anyway, yeah, it just boots up to a library screen, very similar to what you would see in a Steam library, which is Valve's platform for game distribution, if you're not as familiar with it. But for example, if you press the Steam button, you get your typical menus over here like library, home, store, friends and chat, downloads, your typical settings that you would have in Steam itself. But let's take a look at the library. And I've had Steam for quite some time. I'd probably say about 16 or 18 years at this point. But right now, I have just great on Steam Deck. So I have verified games installed, which means you install it, you launch it, it works. Forza and Halo Infinite are the only two I installed that are considered playable but launched just fine. Halo might be a more recent one. I know multiplayer didn't work for a while with the anti-cheat. I know on the Master Chief Collection game, which is a different game, it still doesn't work. But other than that, I enjoy. I just installed Crash Bandicoot last night. I got the Insane Trilogy. Long-time fan of Fable. Peglin, which is kind of like a breakout type of game from the top down. Usually pretty cheap on the Steam store. If you wait for a Steam sale, I'm sure it'll go even cheaper. And then there's the old reliable Portal, Slay the Spire. I have it on my phone, but I want the same saves as I have on my PC, and I can do that by installing it on here, so that's been handy. And then what greater way to make, anywhere from, 1 minute to 1 day disappear than Stardew Valley. And then, of course, probably my favorite, The Witcher 3. I haven't ran into anything game-breaking on any of the verified games yet. I've ran into an occasional hiccup on some of the playable ones, like Halo Infinite on the launch screen. Every once in a while, it'll crash, but I haven't had it crash in-game, so it's kind of a mute complaint in my opinion. But yeah, let's turn the sound up.
I see you got it before me.
But it is a 1200 by 800 screen, but on a screen this size, you really don't need anything too terribly high. And it also fit the price point of the Steam Deck itself. I believe the 512 gigabyte model retails for $649. You get the unit, that microfiber cloth, the case, a little baggie for the wall wart, the charger. And then there are also some in-game Steam perks, like there's an alternate keyboard layout for the Steam Deck itself for typing in stuff digitally on the screen. But yeah, I'll fire up where I'm at right now. Haven't fired it up in a bit, so I don't even know where I'm going to be at. See if I can get past this. I believe I was in the middle of the Bloody Baron questline, which if you have not played The Witcher 3, do yourself a favor. Get it on sale, play it. CD Projekt Red, I'm going to keep it safe for work and say they let you screw up. They let you F up. So every little decision you make has a huge impact, and it already looks better than it did on my Nintendo Switch, which I did buy it for the Switch on sale. I ended up selling it because it was so much better and played so much smoother. The loading screens, I mean, there's no comparison at this point. And I had the frame rate counter on at one point, and it was running at a solid 50, 60 FPS. If you wanted to conserve the battery a little bit and you're used to 30, you could use the thermal profile settings. If you tap the ellipsis button, there's a whole menu in here. It's kind of like hitting that in-game Steam menu that you pull up for like the community. It's similar to that, but you can access like brightness, airplane mode, battery performance. So you can use, there's all kinds of little tweaks you can do. Like right now I have it set on 60, refresh rate 60. You can adjust thermal power settings. So if I was playing Halo, I could adjust this down to maybe 30 frames per second. Turn that on. It may save my battery a little bit. And then there's also the option to force the onboard keyboard to pull up. But there's also a bunch of shortcut keys that utilize the Steam button over here. I know Steam and X will pull up the on-screen keyboard. So if there was a field I needed to enter in text into or type in a password for like signing into Live in Halo Infinite, just Steam X. Usually it's context sensitive enough to where if you touch a text field, a menu will pop. But if it doesn't, that's always available. And then it does sync with your account. The only hiccup I've noticed going between the Steam Deck and my my laptop computer, and this might just be a thing between playing between two different devices anyway, is it'll say it's out of sync. There will be a button that you click on. In this case, you arrow up to that says sync, out of sync settings. And you can do the same thing on the desktop version as well. Right off the bat, it will only show you games that will work on the Steam Deck. So these games pass all compatibility checks, and each one is a great experience on Steam Deck. So yeah, for me, it's mostly an indie game device. Besides, The Witcher 3. There is also a desktop mode, which I will get into. Okay, what I wanted to get into next were the specs of the Steam Deck. So the OS name is SteamOS Hollow, which is it's based off Linux, specifically the Arch Linux distribution. It's SteamOS 3, which means in this case, Valve decided to go with a KDE environment. So if you're familiar with how Windows looks, that is what this will have for a desktop environment. So there's the Steam mode, which is kind of like big picture mode, and then there is a standard desktop. So if you wanted to get into tweaking different game settings to get games working that might be straight up unplayable or playable but needs a lot of tweaking, there is a desktop mode. A lot of people online are using these as video game emulation machines. I won't get into that because that is a very gray area. Also, same thing with obtaining the game ROMs. Not going to get into it. A lot of people online have already done that, so not going to touch that. It's also another gray legal area. Don't want to get into it. So if I go down, I can see the name of the operating system, last time it was updated, and this is just under System. I hit the Steam button, went to System. It'll show me all of these other details about my Steam Deck. I can also do a factory reset from here if I needed to. But AMD actually made the processor for this. It is 4 cores and 8 threads, which means it's kind of an effective 8-core processor. There is 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's not showing all 16 gigabytes because computers rarely do. And then for the video card, it does have a powerful enough video card to play mid to mid high-end AAA games. Something like Halo Infinite, you're probably gonna be playing on low or medium, but really it doesn't look awful like putting it on low on a game like 10 or 15 years ago. And then you can also enable fan control and factory reset it here. For some reason, I disconnected it from power in the middle of an update recently. It did kind of bork my Steam Deck, so I did do a factory reset, but you know what? It fixed it. I do have a micro SD card in here, and you do want to use a higher speed, higher class micro SD card. No one is selling a 500 gig SD card for $20 online. That's legitimate. PNY, SanDisk, Kingston, those are going to be your vendors that make solid micro SD cards that will work well and conform to the micro SD standard. So very much like in the Steam desktop version, you have internal drive, and then you would have, another storage if you had set up another library. In this case, as soon as you format the micro SD card in System, it will show it as a storage option, and you can shift games back and forth. So what I did here was I put The Witcher on the solid state drive, and I put games I discovered are actually a little less demanding on storage on the micro SD card, just so I have fewer total read and writes to my solid state drive. It's way easier to replace that micro SD card, which is in the bottom of the Steam Deck right there, than it is the SSD. Now, I could replace the SSD, but I'd rather not venture into that, considering it's only a few months old now. And then if you had a much more powerful desktop and you wanted to turn this into a controller using remote play, you could do that. You can also use game streaming. So if you have a game on, let's say, another computer that you can't play on here, you could potentially remotely play it across higher speed Wi-Fi, preferably wireless AC, AX, or above. And then you can also mess with notifications if you don't want anything popping up in the middle of gameplay on you. And then Wi-Fi is just pretty typical. You can set security settings, so I have a code on here that I punch in to log into my Steam Deck, and then I just always leave Steam logged in on this. So even if someone else picks it up, they're not getting into it, and I can always remotely lock it too. All right, so we're going to get into what this isn't. This is not a desktop replacement. If you are damned and determined and use a port replicator, or known as a docking station, and plug this in and use a tablet mount, yes, you could, if you hook it up to an external monitor. But be aware, it is not running Windows, it's not running macOS, it's running Linux. If that's your forte, good for you. You could potentially use this as a desktop replacement. But to get to the desktop mode, you press the Steam button, go down to power, tap A, switch to desktop mode. Now, it is handy to have a Bluetooth mouse or Bluetooth keyboard, otherwise using some kind of port replicator or USB to USB-A if you absolutely need a mouse. I would actually prefer to have a keyboard over a mouse if I was in a pinch. I do have a Bluetooth keyboard actually sync with this because I do have the Steam Dock. I got that maybe a week and a half ago. So I could hook it up to my TV, play some indie games just on the TV. I didn't have a computer out there anymore, and my Steam Link isn't what it used to be. So, but no, it's very similar to a Windows desktop. You have an app launcher, very similar to the Start menu, and then Discover, which is the software store, app store. Most of what I've needed has been in this app store. If I needed Lutris to play some games on other platforms like Epic, GOG, or Origin, I could install Lutris. If I wanted Firefox instead of Chrome, which I did right away, all I did was I went into the search, Steam and X to pull up the keyboard, and I just did Firefox. I already have it installed. For some reason it's saying install, but yeah, you just click install and it installs. There's nothing too complicated about it. This is also the spot where if you're moving files back and forth, let's say, you got into emulation or you had to move install files, you would want to make sure you safely remove your flash drive or your micro SD card. It's done down here. And this touchpad, I'm using the right one. Both of them work synonymously, or should work synonymously. It might just be the right one. And that itself, with it being Linux, you could customize it any way you want. But if you need to turn off Bluetooth, you can do it here. Connect to Wi-Fi. If you have to connect to a place like Panera where a browser has to open, it might be easier to do it on the desktop side. And then you still have full Steam access. And I'm just pressing in the middle of the pad. It's haptic. It's got a little bit of a vibrate feature to it, so lets you know you're touching the pad. And I can go into the store, library. One thing I did was I added Firefox as a non-Steam game, so I don't have to go in the desktop mode to use a browser. That is kind of handy because YouTube works. Everything you would expect to work in a browser works in a browser on here. But other than that, it was to me, it was definitely worth the $6.49 plus tax and shipping and all that stuff. Very happy with it. Took it on a few trips with me already. Definitely enjoying it. A few of my friends have gotten them, so now we can have old school LANs together and not have to haul laptops and desktops. I used to be the household where a lot of that happens. Of course, now that we're all grown up, it's a little harder to get together to do that, but when we do, at least it's a lot easier now. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully next week I'll be posting a drink or food review. I wanted to get out a tech one. Can't do a drink one every week, but definitely a tech drink or food review. But have a wonderful week, everyone, and I'll see you next time.